All right, here we go. Brody, nice to see you. Glad you were able to join us. And I know it's kind of early. I know we jumped onto this live stream a little earlier than anticipated. I know if you follow us on Twitter, I put out that we were going to be on at 12:30 Central Time, but we have a couple things that just came up this afternoon, so I decided to jump on a little bit earlier. That way we could break down, have a little more time to discuss. Like I said, it might be a little bit of a shorter live stream because a couple things did come up that we are going to have to take care of. That's why we jumped on the stream a little earlier than anticipated. So hopefully those of you that are watching now will stick around for a little bit, get a little bit of college football talk in there. Maybe we'll pick up a couple more viewers around 12:30 if they haven't gotten the alert already. So once again, glad to see you guys there. Glad to be back once again for this Thursday afternoon live stream. As you all know, we're planning to do this every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. Times always to be announced on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, or if we ever have to cancel, those announcements will also come out on our Twitter at Gridiron Expert. So feel free to follow us there and subscribe here to this channel for content such as these live streams and some individual videos, especially come summer when we hit prediction season. By far my favorite time of the year when it comes down to these videos. Emperor of Rome, good to see you. Glad you're here. Glad you're able to stop by, make it for a little bit. And really, we didn't have a whole lot of designated topics for this live stream. I've got a little bit, of course. Always you have to come prepared, have a little bit of material. But the reason I like these live streams so much, I feel like we've done more live streams this week than we had done in our entire history here at the Gridiron Expert, which is good. Obviously, we're moving in the right direction. These are the type of things that I'm actually starting to enjoy a lot more, and something that our friends such as Uncle Lou or Mark Rogers or guys like that tend to do on a very frequent basis, and that's why we're trying to set that schedule on Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, so you guys know when we're going to be coming on for the live stream. That way we can kind of get a dedicated fan base and get enough viewers showing up for these things. So like I said, not a whole lot of topics coming up. The reason we like these live streams is because of the chats that you guys bring, the questions that y'all bring, the topics that you bring, and so we like to kind of feed off of that. And then, of course, if you don't have anything, I always have some backups that we can touch on. The first thing that I want to talk about, like I said, I know we did start a little early here. We might have to cut the things off probably around 1 o'clock or so, maybe a little earlier than that, depending. Just gonna see how things go. Hopefully, we'll pick up a couple viewers here fairly soon. But the one thing that I want to mention, and I don't even think he's online right now, I don't think he's watching the chat, but our friend Ray7337 made a comment last live stream, so Tuesday, when we were going through the national title odds, and I neglected to mention Notre Dame. They were on the list. I just kind of overlooked them, didn't discuss them, and the biggest thing is, when we come down to these live streams, we can't discuss every team. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to them, of course. We have so many to do. But we can't afford to look at every team. That's going to take some time to do, and so we might neglect some, might overlook a couple teams here and there. But of course, over the course of the season, once we hit summer, so on, we will have our kind of dedications to each individual team. That's just not something we can expect realistically here at the live stream. But I did overlook Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was in the category with Florida, Nebraska, and Oregon at 30-1 odds to win the national title in 2019. And this is a Notre Dame team that, as we all know, went undefeated this past season and made the college football playoff, but got just annihilated by Clemson 30-3 in the Cotton Bowl. And unfortunately, that was something that I think a lot of people saw coming. I don't really think anybody gave Notre Dame a fair chance in that game, and it was pretty obvious that Clemson was going to go in there and take care of business. And I know that hurts from a Notre Dame standpoint, from a fan standpoint to hear that, but Clemson, and we saw that Clemson was arguably the best team in the country. Though they annihilated Notre Dame, annihilated Alabama, so that wasn't like it was a fluke. But the biggest thing for Notre Dame is so the 30-1 odds. I think that's probably about where they need to be. They're behind the likes of Texas and Oklahoma, Michigan, Ohio State, grouped in there with Florida and Oregon. Nebraska, as we mentioned in the last live stream, I think is way too high, or not even too high, just odd that they would be in the same category as Florida and Oregon, two teams that I could see as being legitimate threats to maybe make the college football playoff. Florida taking major strides under Dan Mullen, Oregon, strong recruiting class, strong quarterback coming back, but just switching gears for a second, just got rid of Jim Leavitt as defensive coordinator, and that was an interesting move by Leavitt and by Oregon, period. Because Oregon was really making some strides, I thought, on the defensive side of the ball. So a big loss for them going into this 2019 season for the Ducks. I'm sure they're going to be fine. I have a lot of faith in Mario Cristobal, despite what other people may think. But that is a big loss for Oregon, for a team that is trying to win the Pac-12 and make a case for the college football playoff, something that they haven't done since year one with Marcus Mariota and I think Mark Helfrich. So Brody says we're 0-6. A Notre Dame fan, Brody is 0-6 in big bowl games. We need to get one this year. You're exactly right. I mean, I think it's ESPN or SportsCenter. They put out a statistic after the Cotton Bowl loss to Clemson and highlighted all the major bowl games that Notre Dame had been in for the past, past major 6 bowl games. Whether that's all BCS, New Year's 6 caliber bowl games, and of course this past college football playoff. And Notre Dame just can't live up to can't reach those expectations and win those big bowl games. You're right. You do need to go win one this year. Can Notre Dame get back there? Many people have said Notre Dame joined a conference. They're joined the ACC in basketball, obviously one of the major sports there that they have joined a conference. And I mentioned I think on the Sunday live stream, maybe it was Tuesday, when I said that Notre Dame, would be better off in a conference because as an independent, one loss could derail that entire season. One loss as an independent could derail your chances for a college football playoff berth. Whereas if you're in the ACC, which would be the most logical area, more than likely for Notre Dame, you can lose a game to a solid team like maybe if Miami gets back up there, Florida State, Clemson. You could lose a game like that and still win your conference title game and then make the college football playoff. So Notre Dame is in a very difficult position. And then when they get to these big bowl games, playing the likes of I know they played Ohio State a couple of years ago in the Fiesta Bowl. They played, obviously, Clemson in the college football playoff. I wouldn't go as far as say there's a big talent gap there because Notre Dame's beating some solid opponents in the regular season. Beat Michigan, beat USC, they beat Stanford, beat Northwestern. Now, I know those aren't like the shouting big names. Beat Syracuse, who was a very good team this year. So, I wouldn't say there's a huge talent gap between Notre Dame and some of the other schools, but, something's got to give. And I think Brian Kelly is the right man for the job. A lot of people give him a lot of hate, and I think if this continues where he's unable to win the big bowl games and choke when it matters the most, he could slowly be on his way out. But he has turned around Notre Dame, made them relevant once again. I mean, got them to the national championship in 2012, got them to the college football playoff this year, was in the running for the college football playoffs just a few years ago before struggling down the stretch. But the big bowl games are the ones you have to win, and Notre Dame is one of those programs that expects success and expects to win at least 9-10 games a year, wants to be in contention for a playoff and at the national level. So there's kind of my 2 cents on Notre Dame. Of course, we'll go farther into detail with them closer to the season. Of course, when we do our predictions on them, they have the pieces there, in the schedule. Once again, that they play the majority of the ACC opponents anyways. So they're going to, once again, if they want to make the college football playoff, are more than likely going to have to run the table and go undefeated. And I think they do have a date against Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, later on in the season. So that is a big opportunity. And that's in Athens. That is at Georgia. So that's a big-time opportunity for Notre Dame to make a statement and get a win there and to kind of solidify themselves as legitimate contenders for the playoff. And that's not an easy place to play in Georgia, by no means an easy team to beat. Going through the comments here, Legalize Quack. I still love that username. A big-time Oregon Ducks fan. Apparently, Mario Cristobal was planning on doing this for a while, meaning firing Jim Leavitt. It's why he promoted Hayward to co-defensive coordinator last spring. Good point. Very good point. It caught me by surprise. Whether or not he was planning it or not, Jim Leavitt seemed to be doing a decent job. To me, there was no reason that he needed to be let go. But, I'm not part of that organization. I'm not part of that program. For every program in the country, there are a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that we as fans do not see, even we as analysts do not hear or see. So that's obviously up to Mario Cristobal and whatever he thinks best for that football program. It was just a bit of a shock because Jim Leavitt was kind of making some strides. I think he'd been there for 2 years as defensive coordinator, and it looked like they were going to be making some big strides here after getting a big time recruiting class as well, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, Brody, you're right. Notre Dame players always look shell-shocked in the big bowl games. Don't really know what that's about. There's something to be said for can they perform on that big stage, such as the New Year's Six bowl game or a college football playoff game. But other teams can do it, so Notre Dame has to be prepared to do that as well. And Brian Kelly did phenomenal things with them in terms of those. Like if you read the articles and you watched the practices, the kind of unorthodox practice methods that he ran with the Fighting Irish. That was something having to score from inside the 5. I don't know, with a soccer ball or a tennis ball or something. I can't remember what it was, but there was ways just to create chaos on the field that were trying to help the Fighting Irish for these chaotic situations they would have to deal with in a game. I like that method. I think he's preparing these players there, but the coaches, they can only do so much. Players got to go out there and perform, and they just weren't able to get the job done this year in the playoff. But still, a good year for the Fighting Irish without doubt, and they've got a quarterback now in Ian Book. Emperor of Rome, in my opinion, is they're a team that needs to change conferences, and that is, I could sit here for hours and discuss conference realignments and where I think some teams should go, and if some teams should leave and some teams should be added. I could sit here for hours and talk about that, and we might even have a couple segments on that, individual videos where we break that down. I think that's a great topic, actually. But right off the bat, I would say no, because what justifies a team needing to switch conferences? You can look at some teams in the SEC or the Big Ten, even in the Big 12, teams that have struggled on a consistent basis, and some where you look at them and say, there's just no way that they are going to be able to win that conference. And I hate to say this, but I don't think, especially anytime in the near future, that Vanderbilt would win the SEC, let alone make the SEC championship game. They were looking good, under James Franklin. We're, competitive. We're winning some games, beat some of the... And every now and then, you've got a team like... I'm still using Vanderbilt as an example, but you've got a team like Vanderbilt who has a really good year, and maybe they get lucky, and you see the teams like Florida and Georgia struggle, have a down year, and maybe they split the series between them, beat Georgia, lose to Florida, or vice versa. But... there's a team like Vanderbilt that there's a big talent gap there. Despite being in the SEC, they're always finishing last in the SEC when it comes to recruiting, because someone, in Vanderbilt, someone at a disadvantage because of their high academic standards as well. But 9 times out of 10, a player is going to choose a team like Florida, Georgia, Tennessee over a team like Vanderbilt. So would that justify Vanderbilt wanting to go to another conference? So, hey, if we leave the SEC, could we, compete there? Could we maybe compete for a conference title or be relevant there? I don't know. Same thing with, you could look, Kentucky struggled for so long. But Mark Stoops comes in there and transforms it, and they were relevant in the SEC East up until November. So every now and then you're going to have a team that has that breakout year, and maybe they build something where they once again are competitive. But that's a very good question, something that is obviously up to debate. I don't know if Comic Dude 45 is watching right now, but you got a team like Rutgers who is struggling big time in the Big Ten. There was a team like Colorado for a long, long time was not competing in the Pac-12. It was an odd move to switch from, geographically, it was not an odd move, but the switch from the Big 12 to the Pac-12, and Colorado struggled for a very long time, and really they still are struggling. A couple of years ago, they made the Pac-12 championship game. They looked like they were on, going in the right direction this year. It was past year, going 5-0, but I think they only won like 2 conference games in their first couple of years in the Pac-12. It was ugly. So I think from a university standpoint, they have to think about, what conference is going to give us the best opportunity to win. Now you look at the SEC right now, I think is the best conference in all of college football. And if I'm a coach, if I'm a university president or athletic director, I want my team trying to compete at the best level. So I would want my team to be in the conference where I think if you're going to win, you want to do it right. Because you see some teams, you strength of schedule. The SEC has an advantage with their strength of schedule. Teams in the SEC West can't change who they play. They have to play their Western Division opponents. Same in every conference. But, you look at a team like that, people always talk about teams that are left out of the Pac-12 or the Big 12 from the playoff because their strength of schedule is not that great. So, it's just a bunch of stuff you have to think about. That's a great question, Emperor of Rome. I know I kind of rambled on for that for a little bit. That is something I think we will probably have some videos coming out on very soon. Just kind of maybe if we wanted to realign the conferences or discuss which teams logically would make sense to move in terms of how much better they compete in a certain conference or something like that from a recruiting standpoint. I think it'd be very interesting to see. I think that's something that we'll probably discuss there. So that was a great question. Got a lot of comments during that little rant. Mike Myrick's here. Good to see you. Go Knowles as always. Yeah, legalized quiet. We were talking about Mario Cristobal and the firing of Jim Leavitt as defensive coordinator at Oregon. He agrees that there was no really reason for Leavitt to leave because the defense did improve with Oregon this past season. I think, once again, they would, consistency is key when it comes to the coaching staff and when it comes to trying to help out a team. And you fire or you get rid of Jim Leavitt in February, which I know we're a ways away from the start of the college football season. But Oregon, once again, was coming off a very strong recruiting class. Things were really trending up for the Ducks. Not saying this is derailing their season, but I think it might not have been the best move to get rid of him. Zach Blostein, I don't think we've seen him before, but good to see you if you're still here. Glad to see you joining us on this Thursday afternoon. Comic Dude 45, what should the NCAA do to increase parity in college football? You can't just do an NCAA draft. That's fairly draconian. Well, I mean, if you're referring to just I mean, there's been a lot of talk now about like the transfer portal, and just the amount of quarterback transfers that we've seen, and things like that. You're right. You can't just have a draft. That's not feasible for college. That's what the pros are for. Some are saying we should just get rid of the transfer portal altogether. Just get rid of that process. This is something that the NCAA is going to have to figure out on their own. This is to me, it has gotten out of hand just a little bit. I'm not a fan of a player wanting to transfer from a school, and then that school saying, oh well, you can't transfer. Like, for example, Austin Kendall tried transferring from Oklahoma to West Virginia. He did end up getting to do that, but Oklahoma for a while was like, no, you can't go there because that's, we're going to have to play you. That is inside the conference. I'm not a fan of that. Let the players go to where they want to go. Let them leave when they want to leave. I think they need to have good reasons. I think the sitting out rule should apply for mostly everybody. I think, if you're going to commit to a university and then all of a sudden decide I'm going to transfer to this other school, you need to sit out a year. I agree with that. And I know there are sometimes exceptions to that, graduate transfers, being a senior, so forth, so on. But, it's kind of a hot mess right now. And I don't think, unfortunately, anything on that is going to change very, very soon. I think that's going to take something that's going to take a while to change. And that's something that we're just going to have to deal with and be patient with. But it's not going to change this year. It's not going to change next year. It's going to take a little bit of time. These things that seem like such easy fixes for us, to the league, to NCAA, or any other league, takes a long, long time, which is very unfortunate. Brody L., do I think Dino Babers will get a big-time job in the future? He's got to stay consistent at Syracuse. He's got to stay, what he's done at Syracuse is phenomenal. What he did this year at Syracuse was amazing. But look, lightning, strikes every now and then. You get lucky every now and then. I'm not saying what happened to Syracuse, don't misconstrue that. What happened to them was lucky. That's not what I'm saying. That was a lot of skill. But can he do it again? He had a lot of talent this year. So is Syracuse going to continue to compete at that high level? Is he going to win another 9 games with the Orange this year? Or is he going to go from a 10-win team and drop down to a 6-win team or a 5-win, or maybe miss bowl eligibility completely? He's got to stay consistent. If he wants to land that big-time job, coaches have bad years here and there. You're going to have a really solid year. You can't expect to stay at that high level all the time, especially at a school like Syracuse, who's not necessarily known as a powerhouse. Alabama, Florida State, or I know Florida State not recently, but Ohio State, teams like that usually can't. Dino Babers deserves a big-time job if he can continue the success at Syracuse. And I think Syracuse is a Power 5 school. He's in the ACC. So what classifies a big-time job? Where else would he go? And you can go to a bigger school in the SEC. You can go to a bigger school in the Big Ten. I think those would both be steps up from where he's at right now. But give him time. I want to see how he does this year. And I think I just saw a comment, Legalized Quack said, can he do it again without Dungy? And he's right. Dungy was a phenomenal quarterback for the Orange. I think they've got DeVito now, though, who did play a decent amount behind Dungy this past season. Now I was impressed with the way that he played. So they've got a solid quarterback kind of waiting in the wings. So can he do it again without Dungy, who had been their quarterback for a while? So that's going to be the biggest question. If he does it again, if he wins 8 or 9 games, and stays consistent, he could be leaving Syracuse here fairly soon for a big-time job. And I think he would deserve that. I'm a big fan of his. 20 Savage is here. Good to see you there. Who is my team? I don't always divulge that information. We like to keep that under wraps. Some people know, some people don't. But regardless of who it is, I don't, no bias is ever inflicted on our videos, on our talks, on our predictions, no bias whatsoever. That's one of the things that I try to pride myself on with these videos is unbiased analysis and predictions. Because if you watch a team, or if you watch some videos that are biased, they're just not fun, because you can go there and they're going to make their team go undefeated or do some very unrealistic things, and that's just not I mean, bold, maybe sometimes they work out, but you got to be realistic, and you don't want to be biased towards anybody, or if you've got a team, you don't want to be biased towards their rival or anything like that. So that's one of the things that I pride myself on here. I do have a team. Some people know it, some people don't, but I don't like to divulge it, and even if I did, it doesn't, I'm never going to be biased towards that team or biased towards any of my team's rivals or anything like that. Mike Myrick, yeah, we are back. Glad to see that you're doing well, and yeah, we're back with some college football talk, and that's obviously the goal. That's what we're doing. 9 times out of 10, and I said on this chat, if we got there, if we got some discussion from you guys, we could always touch on college basketball or NBA or NFL, whatever your heart desires. But the main focus of this channel is and always will be college football, as you all know. For those of you that have followed us for a while now. And that's obviously what we love to do, and obviously our main focus. So glad to see that you're enjoying it, and glad to see that you've been fairly consistent with these streams. We really do appreciate that. Comic Dude 45. Didn't Baker Mayfield transfer from Texas Tech? Yes, he did. He did transfer from Texas Tech, went from Tech to Oklahoma. Kind of crazy to think that, all the quarterbacks that Cliff Kingsbury had down at Tech, he had Mayfield before he transferred. He had Patrick Mahomes. And I think he had a quarterback in Davis Webb, who not necessarily was a big-time quarterback, but later on transferred from Texas Tech to California. So that's something to kind of keep in mind there, the amount of talent that Texas Tech did have and at times, and yet Cliff Kingsbury really never could get anywhere with the Red Raiders. And Emperor of Rome, great point. Make sure to go like the video. Pop out of the stream for a second, like it, come back in, or do whatever you need to do. That does help our analytics a lot. So we would definitely appreciate that. So very good point. That's why he's one of my moderators. And as always, the super chat's enabled. If you would like to contribute to the channel, help us out a little bit, as we are trying to definitely take some major strides forward come summer. We'll definitely appreciate that. That's not something that I necessarily want to force on people. This is, the main focus is to talk with you guys and to get our analysis and news out there. But if we can get any super chat stuff on the side, that's always greatly appreciated. Comment Dude 45, what's the reason for making a player sit out for a year after transferring? I'm not entirely clear on all the transfer rules myself. 9 times out of, or I would let me say that, 7 or 8 times out of 10, they make that player sit out. Now, I know like Justin Fields is going to be eligible. I know Jalen Hurts is going to be eligible. Kelly Bryant is going to be eligible immediately. I think sometimes they don't have to sit out if they're like a graduate. If they're one of those graduate transfers or senior transfer, sometimes they got to get their hold renewed or withdrawn from the NCAA. I'm not entirely clear on that. I don't want to go out and say any. I'll do some research on that and get back. I don't want to necessarily give you guys any false information on that, but it is kind of fairly inconsistent in my eyes. And unfortunately, I think sometimes it comes down the NCAA and the NFL, and some people might not like to hear this, but it's a business. It is a business, and sometimes I feel like they look at it and say, what's going to be good for the game? So for the game of college football, it is going to be much better and much more entertaining for us. And I'm not saying this is always how this operates, but having Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields both being eligible immediately at Alabama and Ohio State is going to be a lot more fun for us as fans to see them on the field than having to sit out a year. That's something. And the same in NFL. I think there are sometimes things happen in the NFL where they do things. I think that they do things in the NCAA as well. Like when March Madness comes around, they do things for ratings. They do things for publicity. There's definitely some things that I don't think are always the most ethical choices, but it is what's going to benefit the game and benefit them as a company and a business. Austin Hill, college football playoff prediction, not going there yet. Not going there yet. I've already told you, though, right now the top 4 team title odds are Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. That doesn't necessarily mean that's who people are having going to the playoff. Those are just the top teams in terms of their title odds to win the 2019-2020 national championship. I've told you guys that right now, I think if I had to choose a national champion right now, it would be Clemson, just because of the way they've been playing. It's been unbelievable. The amount of talent they will be returning this season. Trevor Lawrence, despite being so young, just tore apart Notre Dame, tore apart Alabama. They got a solid running game, solid career wide receivers, and a defense that does lose quite a bit of starters, but I don't think we'll see that big of a drop-off. Another solid recruiting class, I think top 10 in the nation, and another great head coach in Dabo Swinney. Clemson's my pick as of right now to be the 1 seed certainly make the national championship. And of course, like I said, wait till prediction season comes around. I know that's what everybody wants to talk about. That's what I want to talk about more than anything. But we gotta wait. We gotta be patient. That's what's going to fuel us through the summer and get us to the start of the season. And of course, we'll have our college football playoff prediction come out then. Comment Dude 45, the NCAA is stricter with forcing people to sit out in basketball than in football. At least that's what I've noticed. And you are right on that. Certainly in basketball more than anything else. And in basketball, almost because of, for switching gears for a second, they've got that one and done rule. You've got the players that come in straight out of high school, play 1 year at one of those major universities like Duke, Kentucky, Michigan State, North Carolina, the big schools, play 1 year, know they're going to get drafted in the top 10 or a first round of the NFL draft, and then bowl. So I can see why those transfer rules might be a little stricter in college basketball than in football, where you have to stay for at least 2 years, especially if you redshirt. So that's something to keep in mind. That's a very good point. Derek W. Who's your Heisman frontrunner for 2019? Trevor Lawrence, or possibly a running back or different position winning it this coming year? I would love, to see a player that is not a quarterback or a running back finally win the Heisman Trophy. I know we've had that happen before, but 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a quarterback or a running back. Trevor Lawrence is up there, without a doubt. If he puts this season coming up, he's going to have the whole year to put up some solid stats. He didn't even necessarily start the season back in 2018. He wasn't the starter. Kelly Bryant was, and of course he decided to transfer. And he got hurt in that Syracuse game. Still put up some phenomenal numbers. Played the majority of the season, but this year he's got that. Tua is still a viable option. You can't consider you can't count out Tua right now. He is. I think your top 2 quarterbacks. I think ESPN or Sports Nation, somebody came out with a list of the top 50 players, and it was 1, 2. I think Tua and Trevor Lawrence, or Trevor Lawrence and Tua. They were the top 2 players in college football. They're the top 2 quarterbacks in my opinion in college football. So Trevor Lawrence is up there. You've got Tua Tagovailoa up there as your top 2, I think, Heisman finalist. Jonathan Taylor is once again back at Wisconsin. He didn't necessarily. He actually had a very good year statistically, but it was overshadowed because of the poor performance overall from Wisconsin, the preseason number 4 team in the country that just that went to the Pinstripe Bowl and annihilated Miami. So it was a very disappointing year for the Badgers. But Jonathan Taylor had a phenomenal year. We just didn't talk about him as much as we did 2 years ago because Wisconsin wasn't in the running for anything. So that's disappointing. But he's back. Had a chance to put up some big numbers in there. I think that's maybe one of your top running backs to keep an eye on for the Heisman. For me, the Heisman race is something that I really, really enjoy talking about. And this was the first time in a long time that I couldn't remember. Most times when you have that Heisman Trophy presentation, you know who's going to win. We knew it was going to be Lamar Jackson a few years ago. We knew it was going to be Baker Mayfield. Most times it was, who's going to win. What's the point of it? This was the first year in a while that we had thought, it was really close, in my opinion, between Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa. And I think they need to find a way to make it a little more dramatic, because sometimes you have a player that just blows other guys out of the water, and you're like, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to win. But this Heisman Trophy presentation, to me, is extremely pointless when we all know who's going to end up winning. But this was the first year in a while that, to me, was a lot more exciting. Let's see here. Legalized Quack, does Utah count as a dark horse, my favorite to win the South? Utah is one of those teams that's been, every now and then that you see them really rise up in the rankings. A couple years ago, they were like 3rd in the rankings, 4th in the rankings, and have usually been fairly consistent in the Pac-12 South. I don't know if I'd consider them a dark horse just because of the way they've been playing. They've been playing extremely well. I think despite losing Tyler Huntley, Zach Moss, Utah made the Pac-12 championship game, barely lost to Washington, and then I think they lost to Northwestern in their bowl game. That was kind of a disappointing thing. But they have a lot of young guns coming up that I think maybe would cause people to overlook Utah a little bit or have some doubts, but could very well win the South Division. The South Division, in my opinion, is not as competitive as the North Division in the Pac-12. So that one, the North Division is kind of more up for grabs in my eyes than the South. And comment Dude 45, yes. He said, you're telling me that in order to qualify for the Heisman Your stats need to be good, and your team has to have a good record. That's not always the case. It's not. I mean, if you look back, that was almost 10 years ago, nearly, with Robert Griffin III at Baylor. Baylor was not necessarily in contention for the national title. We obviously didn't have a playoff system at the time. They weren't even going to a BCS Bowl, which is what the system was at the time. But he was putting up some really good stats, but Baylor was good. They went to the Alamo Bowl, beat Washington, finished with, what did they have that year? 8, 9 wins, somewhere around there. So Baylor was relevant. Now, you could have a team that is doing poorly, very poorly, but you have a player that is just blowing everybody out of the water. The thing is, the way people look at it is, those players kind of get lost. We knew about Trevor Lawrence. We knew about Kyler Murray. We knew about Tua. Those were the players you heard about because all those teams and those quarterbacks made the college football playoff. Jonathan Taylor still rushed for nearly, I think, 2,000 yards this year, if I'm not mistaken. Had Wisconsin stayed relevant in the Big Ten race, college football playoff race, he probably would have gone with them to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Don't think he would have won. I think Kyler certainly deserved it, but he probably would have gone. Wisconsin just wasn't relevant. So, yes, I think your team has to be. You can have a player on a 4-8 team that just plays out of his mind, but you can't win football games by yourself. You got to have the rest of the team to do it. I talk about that in basketball all the time. LeBron James, right now, the best player in basketball, but he can't do everything by himself. We're seeing that right now with the Lakers. He is the best player absolutely on that Lakers team. He can't do it all by himself. He couldn't do it all by himself in Cleveland. He had to get some help. He had Kyrie, he had Kevin Love, so forth and so on. Brought in some people. He couldn't do it by himself in Miami. He had Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, all those guys. Ray Allen helped him out a lot in that one victory. So you can have a team on a 4-8 team, or a player on a 4-8 team play extremely out of his mind, but he's not going to get the attention as an Alabama player that's putting up some really good stats. And they're obviously, people are keeping a bigger eye on them than that 4-8 team. If that makes sense, your team has to be relevant. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Yes, and that's unfortunate for certain players. But you got to put up the stats first off, and then your team has to be somewhat relevant on the national stage. At least in my eyes, that's how. And I feel like that's the way that it has been for a while with the Heisman presentation. Brody L. How is USC so bad with all that talent? Don't get me wrong, I love it that they suck, but it's just strange to think about. I've thought about that a lot myself. USC, I've talked about it many times, how overrated they are. And I have no biasness or no hate towards USC whatsoever. Like I said, this is not a biased channel, so I have no issues with them. But you're right. They usually land a very strong recruiting class. I think I've got the rankings here. USC finishing with the 18th ranked recruiting class this year. But usually, if you remember, especially back in 2010, 2011, 2012, those couple years there, USC would always start off the season in the top 10 in the nation. And they always, or sometimes, I think 2012, somewhere around there, they were number 1 in the nation to start off the year. And, the previous year they had done nothing. They weren't going to a BCS Bowl. They were just, they returned a lot of starters, had a strong recruiting class, and, hey, hell, let's put them at number 1. You're right. So how do they suck with all that talent, and especially with all the hype they get? It is a great question. Now, they were relevant a couple years ago with Sam Darnold, and they had Juju. They had some very, very good talent with USC. Won the Rose Bowl over Penn State, one of the better football games I'd seen in a very long time. And then, of course, went to the Cotton Bowl, but lost to Ohio State. That was, I guess, 2 years ago. So, the talent is there, but it takes some time, and part of it comes down to coaching as well. People don't like to say it, but Pete Carroll did a pretty good job with the Trojans, with USC. He did. Clay Helton, is he the man for the job? Is he the right guy for the job out in Southern California? That's a really good question. And so you can get the talent there, but you got to have the right coaches to coach those players and to develop that talent. That's basically what Comment Dude 45 just said. Talent is not everything. Good or bad coaching is capable of amazing things, and also argue that player development means more. So he took the words straight out of my mouth. I didn't see that comment until after I had said that, but it's why a team like Ohio State could have a disastrous season, or a team like Kansas could win the Natty. You're right. Coaches, you can get a 5-star recruit out of high school But you got to have the coach. Just because they're a 5-star recruit out of high school, one of the best players in the ESPN 300, does not mean that's going to translate to immediate success at this school, at college level. It just doesn't. You got to have the coaches to develop them. If you don't have the coaches to develop them, they're going to stay with that high school mentality where they were the superstar on their high school team, and that's why you've heard a lot of people in the NBA say, I want to change this one and done rule, because we have these kids that are coming, straight out of high school, play 1 year in college, and come to the NBA, and sometimes they work out extremely well. Sometimes they play extremely well, but they don't have they don't necessarily have all the knowledge they need to play at because NBA, anytime you go from the college ranks to the pro ranks, whether it's in football or baseball or basketball, regardless, it's a completely different ball game. And then they're jumping in with these veterans in the pros. And these guys in the NBA, we're saying these guys don't have the necessary teamwork skills. They don't have necessary, the knowledge they're not fully developed. Some of these kids are 19, 20 years old playing with some big-time veterans in the NBA. The same applies to football. You can't necessarily expect these guys to do that. They've got to be coached. They've got to learn. But the thing is, they got to be willing to learn as well. That's the biggest thing. Be willing to coach. A lot of these kids today don't want to necessarily be coached. Can't accept criticism very well. I'm not saying that for everybody, but it definitely is an issue. And Brody says, I hope they sign Clay Helton to a lifetime contract. As a Notre Dame fan, I'm sure you definitely would, because y'all have definitely reigned supreme over them for a while now. And it's been pretty lopsided. That rivalry series has been pretty lopsided as of late. It's had some good games, but it's been pretty lopsided in favor of the Fighting Irish. So, yeah, you're exactly right. I'm sure I'd want the same thing. So yeah, some good discussion. Some very good discussion. I know, like I said, we haven't hit on all of them, but I'm glad you guys have able to jump on. Like I said, I know sometimes middle of the afternoon it can be difficult. It's about almost 1 o'clock now, so I know it can sometimes be difficult to jump on these live streams there. That's why we're going to try to push some of them towards night. As I said, always check out Twitter, @GridironExpert. I know I keep pushing that. Some of you already follow that. It probably gets annoying for me to continue to say it, but check that out for times or anytime we have to cancel. We always try not to, but some days we'll be in the afternoon like today. Some days, most times we're going to try to direct it towards the night, though. Just keep your eyes on Twitter for a time like that. We'll try to put it out a couple hours beforehand, so you'll have to be able to plan, or like I said, just jump on whenever you get the alert. That always works out well. That's usually what I do personally. So, College Dude 45 got out of class recently. Glad he was able to catch the stream. I am too. I'm glad you were able to catch it with us. I'm guilty of it. I know, College Dude, you and I are both kind of the same boat in terms of being in college or in terms of being in school, and I'm guilty of that. I watch my guys, Uncle Lou, Mark Rogers, people like that in class. I work on analytics. I work on preparing material for this show, for the Gridiron Expert, in the middle of class. And don't worry, I'm not necessarily a horrible student, but, do what you got to do. It's a business. It's a passion. It's basically my job. Emperor of Rome, who was the most undeserving Heisman winner? And Brody L says Derrick Henry. You always have, in my eyes, you always have Heisman people that got snubbed. Some, like this year, some people thought Tua got snubbed. I think, a couple of years ago, there were some people that believed that Christian McCaffrey got snubbed. I think that was to Derrick Henry. I would say back in, was that 2006, 2007, I think Darren McFadden got snubbed twice. Once to Tim Tebow, and I think once was it Sam Bradford or somebody like that. Sam Bradford put up some phenomenal stats at Oklahoma, and Tim Tebow deserved to win the Heisman for sure. But I know Darren McFadden deserved to win it one of those years. He was one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the entire nation during that small stretch at Arkansas for him. So there were definitely a couple that I think you saw some players get snubbed, and why that is, I don't know. The Heisman's a voting process. It's not people are voting on these people. It's like it's like politics. People vote. The person that wins, you might not always agree with, or might not be the person you want to win, but it was a vote, and it is what it is, and we just have to accept that. I don't think there's any biasness necessarily that comes into who wins the Heisman. Like I said, it is just a voting process. Deshaun Watson, Chandler Poston, very true. Deshaun Watson did get snubbed as well. But I don't know though. I can't remember who the other candidates were the year Deshaun Watson was was in the running there. But he put up some very, very good stats at Clemson without a doubt. But that quarterback class was strong. Was that the year? I'm trying to even remember. Was that the year with Lamar Jackson, or I can't even recall who the other finalists were that year. Lamar Jackson won it that year, and he deserved it. I mean, if you don't believe Lamar Jackson deserved to win that Heisman, please tell me why, because he was the most electric player and probably the most unstoppable player that year in college football until about the end of the season. Struggled against Kentucky, just got lit up against LSU in that Citrus Bowl, so he became irrelevant there. Towards the end of the season, people slowly started to figure him out, but for a while there, I'll never forget when they, Florida State was number 2, and they just annihilated the Seminoles. Lamar Jackson ran all over them, like that defense wasn't even there. Carson Bailey, good to see you. What's going on? Glad to see that you were able to make it in for a little bit. We're actually, like I said, today was going to be a little bit of a shorter stream. We're already, like I said, time does fly when you're having fun, but we're already at the 41-minute mark, almost hitting 42 here. Like I said, I needed to get off around 1 o'clock. We have a bunch of stuff going on today. I know for some of you guys, I know today is Valentine's Day, so if any of you guys got plans, make sure you go treat whoever that special someone is, get them something nice. I'm not one to give out relationship advice, but whether it's your girlfriend, your wife, your mom, go get them something nice, take them out to dinner. One day a year that try to really step up the game just a little bit. Or in the case of Comic Dude, he said, nope, single here. Go treat yourself. Go get yourself something nice. Go out to a nice dinner. Go out with some friends. Valentine's Day is one of those days that's usually pretty overrated anyways, to a lot of people. But it is one day a year that you can really step up your game or do something really nice for that special someone, regardless of who it is. Like I said, it doesn't have to necessarily be a girlfriend or a wife. It can be someone that means a lot to you in your life. So make sure you definitely step that up. Make sure whoever that is, they definitely feel that love and see that you care. Or in the case of a lot of people, if you're single, go have some fun. Valentine's Day was also Singles Day as well. So, well, this is perfect, guys. I'm about to jump off here in a second. Like I said, I do have a lot of stuff to take care of today. As I mentioned a couple days ago, despite what anybody may tell you, you don't necessarily have all the free time in the world when it comes to college. It has been a very hectic day. Very glad that tomorrow is Friday. Thank you guys for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. I know sometimes it can get a little difficult. We will be back here on Sunday for another live stream. We'll have plenty of content lined up for you guys, plenty of stuff to discuss, especially after another weekend of the Alliance of American Football. We'll have a little bit to talk about that. We might stretch a little bit into the men's basketball, into the NBA as well, as they're about to approach the All-Star break. And of course, I'll have sheets worth of college football content as well. And you guys have been doing a phenomenal job bringing content and questions and a great discussion through the chat, which is once again what makes these live streams thrive and keep us going. So as always, we definitely appreciate that. You guys all have a very safe weekend. Have a happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time here on The Gridiron Expert.